Hi there, I'm Claudia Hosky from Fed Insider, and on behalf of the George Washington University Center for Excellence in Public Leadership and ServiceNow, I'm pleased to welcome you to today's webinar, Adapting to Hybrid Workplaces, the Role of Culture, Technology, and HR. Please type your questions and comments into the Q&A pod. If we don't get to them during today's webinar, we'll share them with our speakers so they can follow up with you. Also, take note of the Resources tab on the left side of your screen to download today's slides and other reading materials. We offer live captioning for all of our webinars. To follow along with us, use the hyperlink under the Live Captioning or Cart tab above the slides. We'll have the full transcript available in the next day or two. And to earn training credit for today's webinar, you'll need to answer all polling questions throughout. And now, let me turn over the reins to our moderator, Kevin Brooks from ServiceNow, to begin today's discussion. Kevin?
Thank you, Claudia. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. I'm Kevin Brooks from ServiceNow, and I will be moderating what I know will be a lively and interesting discussion about a very lively, timely topic, the role of culture, technology, and HR. The federal workforce and their leaders have been challenged in the past few years with a series of events that have tested their mettle and the very fabric of some organizations. It is fair to say that the shocks to the system over the last 2 years have accelerated the rate of change and created new challenges along the way. How leaders navigate organizations and culture, people operations, and technology will be one of the most critical challenges in the coming years. It is both immediate and enduring. It's a fascinating time for federal leaders and change agents, and we have a diverse panel of 4 highly skilled guests with us today to talk about some of the opportunities. So guests, please say hello when I introduce you. First off, I'd like to welcome B.J. Collins, Deputy Office Director for the Environmental Protection Agency's Office of Mission Support and Office of Administration and Resource Management.
Hello, good afternoon.
Next, Dr. Rhonda Jones, Director of Planning, Policy, and Training Division within EPA's Office of Human Resources.
Hello.
Also joining us today is Melanie Saunders, Chief Resilience Officer for NASA.
Hi, everybody.
And last but certainly not least, we have Kathleen Stephan, Associate Director for Management, Executive Officer, NIH National Institutes of Dental and Craniofacial Research, and co-chair of NIH's Strategic Administration Management Advisory Committee.
Good afternoon, everyone.
So thank you all for being here. We have lots of interesting items to discuss regarding the future of work, roles of hybrid workplace, what roles the hybrid workplace will play in attracting and retaining employees, job satisfaction, and improving productivity and culture. We have some amazing talented guests that I just introduced you to, so I want to take a moment to learn a little bit more about them. So BJ, let's start with you and tell us a little about you and your role at EPA.
Excellent. Thank you so much, and I'm happy to be here today. So again, as you stated, my name is BJ Collins. I'm the Deputy Office Director. You've already said all the acronyms, so I don't have to do that again. Our office is responsible for managing EPA's largest owned facility. It's also its largest office presence outside of Washington, D.C. It's a 1.2 million square foot laboratory facility that also houses a lot of the agency's administrative functions. So our organization is responsible for the management of that facility, IT management of that facility. And then we also are home to one of the 2 shared service centers for HR operations. We service a little over half of the agency's customers, providing day-to-day HR support, staffing classification, benefits, retirement counseling, and then we also provide LAR support. Our office also provides executive services support to all of the agency's SES, politicals, and non-career SES staff as well. And again, I'm happy to be here today.
Thanks, BJ. Rhonda, same question to you.
Well, hello again. As you said earlier, I'm Director of HR Policy Planning and Training at the Environmental Protection Agency. So my division services all 15,000 EPA employees and has been heavily involved in helping the agency with various components of the future of work, including curating leading practices regarding hybrid work. And I'm really delighted to be here.
Thank you. Melanie, over to you.
Hi there. So I'm in charge of future of work and COVID response at NASA, and those two kind of dovetail nicely together. I keep joking that in the past month or so, that COVID's an uninvited guest to every meeting, and we keep trying to talk about future of work, and sometimes we get distracted by COVID, but we're making progress, and now we're talking more about future of work. Those two actually dovetail really nicely together. I think most of the people have a pretty decent idea what NASA does to advance the exploration of the solar system and the universe and advances in technology and aeronautics. We have 10 field centers and we have about 17,000 civil servants. We have many more contractors than that, on the order of 50, 60,000. But for the topic of future work, this mostly affects our civil servants. And we are working in a very exciting and energetic manner to get into what we're calling an experimental phase, where we're going to spend most of the rest of the year experimenting on future work at NASA. Thanks.
Great. And finally, Kathleen.
Thank you, Kevin. As you mentioned earlier, I'm wearing two hats today. I'm the Associate Director for Management for the National Institute of Dental and Craniofacial Research. This is one of NIH's 27 institutes and centers. And in this role, I lead the business functions in support of the science for my institute. Additionally, I have the unique opportunity to serve as co-chair of the NIH Strategic Administrative Management Advisory Committee, known as the SAMAC, and we're charged with exploring and creating NIH's vision for the future of work and developing NIH-wide strategies and guidelines that reflect new and emerging realities due to COVID-19 pandemic. We've learned quite a bit during the pandemic about what we can achieve in alternative working conditions. And to create this vision, we're really working with a broad and diverse perspectives and input from the NIH communities and researching and benchmarking workforce trends in order to really create our direction where we're going with future of work. It's a very exciting opportunity, and I appreciate you having me here today.
Thank you. Well, thank you all for your feedback on your backgrounds and your history and what your agencies are doing. I'm sure our audience appreciates knowing that all of you are here working on these problems, and they're looking forward to hearing what you have to say. So we're going to attempt to cover a lot of ground today, so we're going to jump right in. BJ, is your agency using digital or mobile enhanced or enabled approaches to support visitor processes, reserving workspaces, and service requests that might have been done face-to-face prior to the pandemic?
Yes, Kevin. Happy to answer that. Yes, we kind of had to pivot as well. So we've been in the Microsoft environment for a number of years now, and right before the pandemic, we were in the process of transitioning to Microsoft Teams for most of our collaboration. So since the pandemic, we have been leveraging multiple platforms such as Teams and Zoom to host public meetings and interact with the public virtually. Teams is mainly our internal and then also government-facing platform, but we also use Zoom for public meetings and then also to work with other agencies that may use Zoom rather than Microsoft Teams. So we are increasing our capability to host hybrid meetings so we can have staff visitors in person as well as people on screen virtually. We often host public hearings that are a part of the process when the agency updates its rules related to the number of laws that we're responsible for carrying out. And we've heard from many of our state partners that they like the increased access to staff from virtual interactions. So more often we're able to get together virtually, whereas before it might be quarterly or even semi-annually that we're able to get together. However, most of our state partners are also looking forward to returning to those face-to-face interactions, especially as many states have already returned to the workplace. So it's clear that leveraging technology will allow us to be flexible and better serve the public. As far as internally, we are using Teams and continually increasing our capabilities on that platform and leveraging the full Microsoft suite for use with reserving spaces, conference rooms, and what will become our hoteling in a hybrid work environment. So we anticipate using Microsoft Outlook to reserve and manage space for employees that may be teleworking but need to come in the office a couple of days of pay period, or that may be remote working but would like to come in for a meeting, that they are able to reserve space and use spaces while they're in the physical workplace. give it back to you, Kevin.
Okay, great. That's a very good perspective. So, Melanie, I wonder, how is that aligned with or slightly different from what you guys are doing over at NASA?
Sure. Well, very similar to what BJ described for EPA, we also migrated to an Office 365, Microsoft Office 365, in the 2019 timeframe. Thank goodness, because when like most of you, I'd never had a Teams meeting until March 2020, and I pretty quickly turned to all Teams meeting in March 2020 and ever since. So we were able to really take advantage of the capabilities that provided. Thank goodness we're also looking to that platform to continue to expand things like scheduling conference rooms for hybrid meetings, which wasn't necessary for remote meetings, but we're now in that process. Of course, there's a little overhead there. We have to go in and load in the conference room and all those locations, so we're in the middle of doing that. And then we're also still trying to test several options for scheduling hoteling space at NASA centers and NASA sites. We have a little less of a public interface than the EPA, although we do spend a lot of time trying to inspire the public and the next generation of space explorers, but most of that is through multimedia events, television, webcasts, podcasts, et cetera. So a little less of that need for the public input, although we have continually, like most agencies, tried to make more of our our processes as technology enabled as possible. There have been restrictions on visitors to NASA centers during the pandemic, frankly, which we're just now seeing subside as we merge back into that 100% occupancy allowed at NASA centers. So yes, we are using technology for all of those things.
Okay, Melanie, can I follow up on that a little bit? So you mentioned the technology you're using to utilize the current space. Are you also using that to better design, manage, and optimize workspace for the future of work, not just the COVID response?
Yes, absolutely. Great question. So I felt like I spent most of last year standing with my arms spread trying to stop people from wanting to build hoteling space. And I'm really glad my instincts served me well, because last year what people were thinking we would want in terms of hoteling space were these large banks of concentrated hoteling space. As the year has gone on, as last year went on and we got into this year, it became apparent that what is really more useful for most employees is to have a hoteling space in their work team neighborhood. And so we are trying to focus on that. Right now, we've had some people at different locations clean out their offices if they were wanting to be a remote worker. They don't need an office on site. That frees up some hoteling space in each of those office team neighborhoods that will allow people to schedule that. We are planning to use the feedback from the scheduling software to tell us what the demand is. I mentioned an experimental phase for future work that we're in the middle of right now. We're hoping that will tell us if some of our assumptions going in were correct. For example, is 4 employees to 1 hoteling space the right ratio? Do we have that right? We're planning to use feedback from the actual use on those facilities to inform our bigger, more significant investment decisions, which we'd really like to get into in this fall, hopefully able to fold it into the next budget cycle. So we're definitely trying to take the data and feedback. In some buildings in some NASA locations, namely our headquarters building in Washington, we have badging in to the building, and we have that at some of the other NASA facilities. But in many cases, people badge onto the site or may badge into a building, but we don't have a way of knowing where they are in the building. So really we will want to do that in some places for safety concerns. For example, if you've ever seen the gigantic vehicle assembly building down at the Cape at the Kennedy Space Center, that's a building where if somebody's in that building because we have to, because it's hazardous. We have many facilities that are not quite that hazardous across the agency, but there are certainly ones where we would want to know where people are in cases of inclement weather or other emergencies. So we're working through that. That's something that is important to us in our safety culture.
Great, that's fascinating stuff. I love hearing that. Hearing the use of the data that you're gathering now for that future layout. That's really impactful. Does anyone else have anything about that on the same line that BJ or Melanie didn't cover? Okay, great. So, Rhonda, we'll jump right into the next question for you. In effectively in implementing a hybrid environment, what are some of the roles that human capital officers are using to ease the return of the agency's workforce back to the office?
Thank you for that question. So at EPA, our mission is to protect human health and the environment, and we view human capital officers as essential to that mission, especially now as we acclimate everyone to the return to the workplace and ensure our employees feel valued and have the support mechanisms they need to thrive. So in terms of some of the actions our HR specialists and officials have taken at EPA, I'll just go through a few of them. One, we've helped with policy. We've revised our telework, remote work, and work schedule policies and conducted training for all 15,000 of our employees. We are also collating training on how to excel in a hybrid environment. We don't want our employees just to be okay, but we want them to thrive. We've also curated training on empathic leadership. And in terms of performance management, we have training already in trying to get supervisors and managers to move from observation of performance to outcomes and impacts. In the area of communications, we've drafted and worked with others to draft messages for senior leaders, supervisors, to our employees, so there is consistent messaging. And again, the fact that we care about our employees comes through in all of that messaging. We've also partnered with senior leaders to ensure diversity, equity, inclusion, accessibility, and we've added B for belonging is properly incorporated and considered in all of our return to the workplace efforts. So really, as mentioned earlier, EPA depends on our human capital officials to keep up with hybrid leading practices, to share those practices and help implement them. So I could probably go on with many other things, but we have other questions and people to get to. So that's just a bit about what our human capital officials are doing to ease the return of our workforce at EPA.
Great. Thank you for that, Rhonda. Kathleen, I will take it over to you and ask you how is that being handled at NIH?
Sure, and to echo much of what Rhonda has said, our human capital officials are pivotal leaders and collaborators in every aspect of designing and easing the return of our workforce. As an institute administrative leader, I work closely with HR leadership. At NIH, the role of the Office of Human Resources, it's multifaceted, always working in partnership with our scientific and administrative leaders to design the best approach for our workforce, and always including the community and stakeholders in implementation of policy decisions. So for instance, our Human Resources Office, they were responsible for coordinating our return on site, initially by developing an NIH-wide plan that was launched in the summer 2020, given the needs of our agency's mission, and later coming into alignment with the broader HHS plan as other agencies started to return on site as well. And in doing so, our HR shop, they were responsible for communicating to NIH management about our return efforts so that we could effectively manage our respective staff. They provided guidance to leadership and management through this process and engaged us as partners to navigate each stage of the pandemic. In addition, NIH has constructed cross-functional groups of leaders that are meeting on a regular basis to assess the current operations during the pandemic and while keeping an eye on post-pandemic. And OHR has a primary seat at that table with other scientific and administrative leaders because they're integral in developing NIH's way forward. And when I think about looking to the future, our human resource professionals, they have the role to really help us promote a flexible and agile hybrid workforce to ensure that we're fair and equitable access and that we open that up, the workplace flexibilities to staff. So at NIH, our HR team is heavily involved in creating the vision of future work and ensuring that it's a shared vision across our leadership. As a biomedical research agency, we have some employees that never stop reporting on site and others that have been back for some time. However, we don't necessarily believe that everyone needs to return. There are segments of our workforce that can continue to work from home, either full-time or part-time, and HR has been instrumental in helping to explore what this could look like. Our OHR staff provides support for the use of these flexibilities through the development of policies and guidance. And as a final note, I do want to mention that our HR office, they're partners with us and the other NIH offices to really promote employee wellness, resources around training opportunities, and giving us additional support to help all of our workforce, taking a more holistic approach, as many others are as well, to help our staff through this transition.
Thank you very much for that one. I'm going to stay with this topic a little bit, but shift slightly to a couple of degrees to the right on this, I think. So, BJ, can you tell me some of the approaches that you're taking at EPA to ensure the effective communication, reporting, and process management as your agency brings back in? We just heard about a lot of the things with the HR side of the house, but how about those policy things that are much more, I guess, administrative and implementation centric?
That's a great question, Kevin. So at the beginning of this process, working with the deputy administrator and the political team, we were very conscious and working to communicate at every level of the agency. So, for instance, the deputy administrator is committed to communicating weekly. She either sends out a mass mailer or a video or hosts a town hall to provide updates on EPA's future of work and return to the workplace. We also have internet information resources on all of our hot topics, our new HR flexibilities and telework, remote work, and work schedules, updates in facilities, questions about safety in the facilities, updates on transit in the areas where folks are commuting from. We also have provided supervisory talking points to our supervisors and hosted multiple training sessions for supervisors on the return to work and the new telework, remote work, and workplace or work schedule policies so that they're prepared to work with their staff. And then we've also hosted employee Q&A sessions with our union partners to provide employees an opportunity to ask questions directly to the deputy administrator. So really focusing on consciously communicating to each level of the agency and over-communicating when possible. And as far as how we communicate, I already mentioned some of the tools that we do use, but we try to use more than just the basics like email and Microsoft Teams. We've uploaded tons of videos on how-tos, using Teams, the different functionality, how to host a hybrid meeting, how to use Microsoft Teams with our existing Cisco televideo systems. We've also provided separate sessions during lunch, which would be a conversation with, an individual that's responsible for a certain part of the process of returning. And then, as I mentioned, we've also hosted virtual listening sessions and then developed a multitude of technology quick reference guides that allow folks access to answering their questions as far as how to use the new technology, how to work in a hybrid environment, and how to interact in this new environment as we return to the workplace. Turn it back over to you, Kevin.
Thanks, BJ. Appreciate that. Melanie, can you give us some insight into how you guys are handling that at NASA?
Sure. Well, not unlike what BJ described, very similar campaign going on right now, especially as we go through this time where all our capacity restrictions are lifted, and it really should be the future of work and people's preferences that determine how people work in the absence of those COVID-driven restrictions. So we're doing, I also work for the deputy administrator. We've had the whole leadership team participate in town halls and various messages for the entire agency. We're doing town halls about every 6 weeks. We're doing supervisor sessions once a month, and really the focus of almost all of them this year are related to the future of work topic. One we had this month earlier in April was about how to do remote and telework agreements, which we've asked people to update in the near future. And we have various other topics, everything from performance manual management, how to manage remote employees, a little bit more about that, how to characterize their performance plan. We meet with our union every other week, very similar to them. We have put out various regular employee messages. You really can't, he's right, you really can't over-communicate on this. So we gave supervisors talking points on how to have the discussion with employees about their preferences and desires for telework, remote work, et cetera. We also put out really enhanced our website related to future of work that everybody at the agency can access. There's training and resources related to culture, leadership, mechanics, everything from how to really include remote and virtual employees in a meeting, the mechanics, what type of IT tools can be purchased very cheaply, more like the $1,000 type of item that is necessary for this year when we haven't been budgeted any real investment money for all of this. So those are all really important. And then a series of brown bag sessions, which related, very similar to what BJ described, things like tools and specific topics where people want to delve into more details. We've also been sharing the information with our contractors, since that comprises a very large part of our NASA family and NASA team, and sharing with them what NASA is doing. That's a little different. The contractors are their employees, so we have to be mindful of that, but we're trying to share with them what we're doing and hoping that they will be able to offer similar flexibility. We've also been doing a series of visits. I meet with all of the officials in charge on a weekly basis so we can all be on the same page. They can ask questions. We can make sure they're amplifying the messages. And then I've been going around to all the NASA centers, meeting with their leadership teams, meeting with their ERG representatives, meeting with their future of work teams. And we're also deploying a lot of surveys right now and trying to get directly to the individual employee. How's it going? Are you getting the flexibility? Somebody will be able to figure out pretty quick if somebody is not giving flexibility that we've asked all the leadership to do. So very similar to EPA, we are really it's a very intensive communicative time. I'm still not sure it's enough, frankly. I don't know if you ever can communicate enough.
Yeah, I don't think you can, but you're making great strides, and that's great to hear. So we're going to stick with kind of the employee engagement conversation, but shift just a little bit. So Kathleen, employee engagement is growing in importance as we're seeing over the last 2 years. Probably it's been known forever, but I think looking for new ways to use technology to engage your workforce is becoming top of mind. Can you give us some examples of how you all are doing that at your agency?
Thank you for that question. Employee engagement, it has been and continues to be at the forefront of what we do. During COVID-19, during the pandemic, the critical role that technology played amplified to ensure continuity of NIH's mission and operations and the health and safety of our staff, while NIH quickly shifted to maximum telework. For us, that was about 50% of our workforce and about 100% of virtual meetings. It became evident very early on that engaging our workforce was not only necessary but pivotal in designing the way forward. This played out in many ways, including regular and timely town halls, providing updates through biweekly email communications to staff from NIH leadership, new intranet sites with critical workforce, safety, operations information, and pulse surveys, just to name a few. Most recently, NIH leadership provided critical updates to staff at an NIH Return to Work virtual town hall, where staff were encouraged to submit questions in advance to make sure that they were really addressing the concerns of the community. The NIH also has shifted large engagement activities to virtual to reach a wider audience of staff. These include activities like award ceremonies that have gone virtual, which has created a more inclusive ceremony by having different organizations submit videos that highlight the culture of their organization. And it also created an opportunity for more staff to be involved in the process and also allowed for broader participation. We also have upcoming Take Your Child to Work Day at NIH. For us here, I believe it's at the end of April, we have over 150 virtual activities that reaches hundreds of children, because we don't want to lose sight of how important it is to inspire and teach the children about the excitement of science. Also coming up, Public Service Recognition Week. I believe that's the beginning of May. We have many virtual engagement activities planned. We use crowdsourcing to get feedback from our community. And NIH continues to offer a wide array of resources to staff, including health and well-being, training and safety, resource pages that include also emotional and social wellness toolkits, just to name a few. We have organizations and cross-agency groups that use platforms to engage employees, share information, look for best practices, and problem solve. And we're fortunate to have access, as many of my colleagues on the call today, to multiple platforms to engage staff in different ways depending on the size of the group. One thing I want to highlight is the part of being, engaged is about taking care of the whole person, taking care of a workforce. We've learned quite a bit during this pandemic about what we can achieve in alternative working conditions. And it's important that we learn from this experience. Speed, creativity, and teamwork were of the essence in our ability to innovate and quickly respond to the agency high priority needs over the last 2 years. So our goal is to keep that momentum going and to expand our use of digital services, all while keeping, the mission and the workforce at the forefront.
Wow, that's quite a bit. That's great to hear. I know if I were working for your organization, I'd love to have those virtual interactions for families. That's really great. So, Rhonda, are you guys doing similar or parallel activities at the EPA?
Yes, we are. So in terms of technology, we too have the usual tools. Teams for virtual meetings, we have dashboards, visual conferencing technology on site, and so forth. And I know BJ has already gone over many of the technology EPA uses to help our employees with engagement. In addition, we're encouraging our senior leaders to really think about technology in a hybrid workplace a little differently than they have before. We use a pretty concise model developed by the Gartner Group. And so it has 4 different, phases, so to speak, of working. So there's working together, and you're in a group, you're co-located. Then there's working alone together, though, so you are in a remote space but working together on a project or more than one project. And then you could be working together, you could be working together but apart, and then working alone and apart. So when we think about that, what we're trying to do is say, okay, how do we have the technology to support our employees regardless of where they are, co-located or not? How do we help them work together when they're together, work together when they're apart, or work alone when they're together or alone? And so using those 4 different models or ways of working has been extremely helpful in terms of technology and engaging employees. If we switch specifically to employee engagement, we probably do things that other agencies do as well, a strong union collaboration. We also have outreach to our HR community, our first line supervisors, advisory group, our Emerging Leaders Network, and other similar groups across EPA. We rely heavily on guidance from our Organizational Development Officer and our Employee Engagement Team. We have live and recorded all-hands, town halls, training sessions, also targeted senior leader videos and mass mailers. We, as I mentioned before, we partner with our senior leaders and our communications offices to have one consistent voice in staff meetings and messaging. Also, our administrator and deputy administrator have asked us to use data analytics to highlight trends in the Federal Employee Viewpoint Survey, the OMB Pulse surveys, and some of our own internal surveys and some qualitative data we've gathered to help identify and address employee concerns, and also use those to help enhance engagement. And then, like Melanie mentioned, for NASA, EPA has a Future of Work intranet site, and we have tons of things listed there. I'll go through just a few. I think what is really of note is the first message on the page says, our priority at EPA is our employees' health and wellness. And that goes back to the quote earlier that someone made about the whole employee. And so on that page, we have different work flexibilities. We have information on getting to work because we know that that's still a concern for employees. How can they stay healthy and safe while commuting? We have a re-entry schedule. We have steps that EPA is taking to protect our workforce and facilities. We have those resources, a lot of them linked to our employee assistance plan and other health and wellness activities we have, which are very robust throughout EPA. And we also have a video library of our archived recorded messages from EPA leaders on Future of Work. So yes, we are doing a lot of the same things that other agencies are doing them, but we're putting our EPA culture in there and our spin on things to just make sure our employees are well supported, and they continually know that.
Thank you very much. That's But between you two, that's a whole lot of stuff going on, and I love to hear it. I'm absolutely here for it. So I'm glad to hear that federal agencies are taking a very proactive look to this stuff. So we're going to stick with the employee experience, and we're going to move just one step further and talk about a management challenge, if you will. So Melanie, as employees return to work, are you seeing signs of hesitancy to return to the old norms?
Oh, yes, absolutely. The world has changed in the past 2 years, and we learned a lot during the pandemic, and we're trying to make sure that we capture those. I think it was funny, I can think of NASA as an agency of problem solvers. I think we even impressed ourselves at some points because we did things virtually that we were surprised about that we didn't really know, things related to how we did research and analysis and things remotely or keeping people safe. There were times certainly where people had to get in a clean room and be all together, or where they were working on the big SLS rocket engine on the test down at Stennis. So there were times when we just had to do things the old-fashioned way, but we really were able to come up with a lot of things. I think the supervisor who doesn't understand that and hasn't really internalized how much the world has changed and people's expectations with them. To me, I liken it to, okay, hey, I know you've been using this iPhone and this laptop for the past couple of years and done a great job, but now I want you to go back to using this wall phone. And it's really good because I'm going to give you a really long cord. Now you can reach the living room, all over the kitchen, the laundry room, the front hall, but I want you to go back, put down that iPhone, and we're going to go back to the wall phone. It's that absurd. So we're trying to make sure that people really have internalized that the world has changed, people's expectations have changed, and this is an important change that NASA needs to evolve and be forward-thinking and make sure that we continue to attract and retain the highest talent. The other thing we've really tried to focus on is managing expectations with regard to hybrid meetings. So we've done all remote for the past couple of years in many cases on a lot of meetings, and we did that really well. I was very proud of our team on how we did that. Hybrid has been a little bumpier, and I will be honest about that, even at NASA, and it's going to be bumpy. You can train people after 2 years of the pandemic, don't you? We all roll our eyes at somebody when somebody forgets to mute their mic. It's like, okay, really, virtual meeting 101. But people remember to mute their mics, but when some people are in the room, they don't always remember to mute the speakers on their computers if they're using the sound system in the room, and then you get the never-ending echo that goes. And so just training people to the new things that are unique about hybrid and how to interact with the room. I liken this. I was in the space station team when we were building the space station, and we learned a lot of things that we had studied, I thought, every problem that we expected to encounter, but we didn't realize that if a solar array has been rolled up for quite a while, sitting on orbit, waiting to be unfurled, when you start to unfurl it, you get stiction. That was a new word we created. Stiction was the solar arrays sticking together, and they tore. And we had to come up with a way to deploy these things that were way out the length of a football field out on the space station. Hybrid meetings are going to be like that. There's things that you learn when you're building the space station and for the first time and living inside of it. There's things you're going to learn about hybrid meetings, and we just have to be patient. We will and trust that we will figure it out. And so we're trying to really manage people's expectations there.
Great. Kathleen, are there any things that you're seeing that are either the same or unique from what Melanie just described?
Sure. I think very much in line with what Melanie described. I believe we're seeing a whole array of sentiments, around returning to the physical workplace. From those who have been full-time for, let's face it, over 2 years. Some are embracing the return while others remain hesitant. Our supervisors and managers are learning to lean into the flexibilities that are being offered at HHS and NIH, which is including a local remote option for the first time. Over the next several months, we are considering it a time of experimentation with new and different schedules for staff and the use of hybrid meetings. From the perspective of future work visioning, this very much includes planning for these experiments as we re-enter the workplace. And as NIH recently transitioned from maximum telework posture to a safe return to physical workspaces, we'll use this transitional phase to explore potential new working models that will support the future of science, continue to make NIH an employer of choice, and foster a positive and innovative workplace and culture. I mean, I agree. The reality is we're not going back to a pre-pandemic workplace, and we know the world has changed. And in light of all that, we are strategically reassessing our priorities and plans with an eye towards the future and new ways of working. And technology will continue to be a force that brings people together as most organizations across government and industry shift to some form of a hybrid environment.
Oh, that's great. So I'm BJ, I'll ask you the same question, and then I'm gonna follow up with another question after that. So BJ, how are you at EPA taking a look at the hesitancy issue?
Yeah, I mean, I think very similar to what Melanie and Kathleen described, we have seen that many employees want to return to the workplace. However, they want assurances that it's safe to return and that they don't necessarily have to return to the same way we worked before. So to this end, we've worked hard with our union partners to ensure we develop safety plans that address their concerns, such as ventilation, cleaning, and then flexibility in leave and working from home should someone be exposed to COVID or potentially be exposed to COVID. We've also implemented a new remote work policy to allow those employees who work as truly portable the opportunity to work from home full time. And then for those employees, which at EPA is a lot of them, that have to come into the office some amount of time, but would like more flexibility, we have updated our telework policies to give maximum flexibility to telework. So that would be up to the maximum, which is only coming in 2 days pay period. But then also, more importantly than that, flexibility in situational telework. So this is what we heard from a lot of folks is, I don't necessarily want to work remotely, but I would like the option to, in the summertime, work from somewhere else for a month. So our new policies allow the flexibility for employees to work from different locations for longer periods of time, should their work support that. And then the last piece of that is also the schedule piece. So we updated our our work schedule policy to allow employees the opportunity to work partial days in the office. Maybe they want to start their day at home, finish their day in the office. Well, the new work schedule policies allow employees the flexibility to do that. It also allows folks to work around their busy personal lives or to commute during non-peak hours. All of these are key, and when we polled our staff last summer, flexibility was the key word we kept hearing from employees. So that's been our focus as we move back into the workplace. With that in mind, leadership feels strongly that the inter-office interactions and collaboration are crucial to carrying out the agency's mission. So we're excited to welcome staff back, but the pandemic has shown us that it does not need to be on the frequency and same schedule as before.
Yeah, what you're all saying are what I've been hearing throughout the federal space, and it's really encouraging that, as a former Fed, that your agencies are taking a proactive approach to finding new ways to get the work done and still meet the employees where they are. So I want to remind our audience that you can type questions into the chat window, and we will get them if we can. And I would not want to miss the opportunity to ask these amazing speakers about how they're handling these challenges. And so we're going to go into another question that's on the same thread, but slightly different. So Rhonda, how do you think the future, how do you think right now and the future, you're going to start tackling bringing in new hires that help with mission effectiveness, but also get that connectedness when it's in a hybrid environment? I mean, so how do folks get the culture when there's so much distance and everyone isn't inside?
That is a great question. So EPA looks at this holistically, and we go back to the employee life cycle. For us, it has several components. So there's, of course, the recruitment and selection process and performance and, transitioning the employee to something else as retirement or whatever that people traditionally think of. But we have embedded into the employee life cycle diversity and outreach, employee engagement, performance management, training and development, and also knowledge management and transfer. And so in terms of this new work environment, we know from the literature and the research that we've done that there are some generational differences in how our employees are experiencing what's happening. For Gen Z, they typically are most impacted by workplace disruptions due to COVID-19. And a higher percentage say the pandemic has made their education, their career goals, and their social lives more difficult when compared to millennials and Gen Xers. For millennials, we see that they're struggling a bit more than Gen Xers and boomers to get their work done, and they worry about mentorship and career advancement. The research says they also report higher levels of anxiety and sleeplessness than Gen Xers and boomers. And then just overall, all employees want flexibility, but not isolation. And one size does not fit all. So EPA has revised its onboarding process. So it begins once an individual receives a job offer, not once they come through the door, but that job offer. And it continues a full year after they're hired instead of just being a few days of training at the start. So for pre-onboarding, supervisors are encouraged to invite new hires to team meetings and to other key events to reinforce the great choice they made to join EPA, and also to begin acclimating them to the EPA family. Once on board, we have a buddy system for them, someone to kind of help them navigate the new environment that they're in. For people who are in the physical workplace for the first time ever, we have place pals for them to kind of show them around and make sure they're comfortable in their surroundings. We have new hire surveys, and we look at those for insights as to how we can better help our employees. We also started a tailored employee engagement module. So approximately 30 days after we hire employees, we invite them to an employee engagement session. Our employee engagement team has an interactive module that spurs interest in the various ways they can have their voices heard and make a difference at EPA. We also have toolkits for our supervisors and managers, really step-by-step guides, templates for introducing new employees to the agency, ensuring inclusiveness in meetings and awareness of our employee councils and affinity groups. And we're also working on career progression and development, fully integrating our national coaching program. That program is moving under our Chief Learning Officer and our Learning and Development branch, so we're excited about that. And then I think the probably last thing I would highlight is knowledge management and knowledge transfer. We're not just waiting until employees retire, they're like, okay, see ya, 2 weeks out, I'm gone, to start transferring knowledge. We are doing that from day one, and we're helping our supervisors and our managers just think of that as just the way of doing business, the culture of EPA, and that way we can make sure our employees stay engaged, have room to grow, and really see EPA as their home long term. So yeah, that's some of the ways EPA is keeping our new employees engaged.
That's great. Melanie, how are you all handling it at NASA or, at NASA?
Well, first of all, I just want to compliment Rhonda from the EPA. What you all are doing there is really a tremendous best practice for the entire government. And I was taking careful notes, and I plan to liberally plagiarize from that and use some of those. We've been talking about some of the same things like peer buddies, how to get, somebody who can not just be a mentor. Having a mentor is really critical, but having somebody have a peer mentor that can sort of be that guide to how to get stuff done, especially if somebody's in a hybrid environment or a remote worker. We are seeing a real thirst for on-site presence from the entry-level employees, and we have a number that started during the pandemic and have never really been on-site very much, if at all. And so we're working through that. So, but very similar to what EPA described, trying to do that. I love the one-year onboarding process, which I think really gets at some of the same concepts we've been struggling. I've been encouraging people, hey, even if it doesn't make sense to do an on-site meeting for everybody, at least plan some social events and try and plan them at different times so the whole team can make it. I can tell you, when I was a mother of school-age children, when I had 3 kids in daycare, I stopped going to lunch because I was trapped between the daycare hours and had to get my work done then, had no time in the evening. When they were school age, I had the heavy activity years where I was off being an unpaid Uber driver in the late afternoon, early evening, so I couldn't go to happy hours. There were things like that. So trying to make sure that people offer a variety of ways for everyone to connect so that you can really get people to meet everybody. I do tell people also, Teams is the first time that we've really had the ability to reach out directly to everybody in the agency. It's as if I suddenly have everyone's cell phone and can text them. And it's really, really tremendous. And it's really possible to do a lot of management by walking around using Teams. And so if you can't get there or find people in person, or you feel like you have members of your team that are in a geographically disparate area, really encourage people to use the tools that Teams and other virtual platforms offer to be able to reach out and do some of that one-on-one, hey, just wanted to chat for a few minutes, how's it going, what's going on. So that's something that I really think a lot of people don't think about. They get stuck in their mind that you have to do that only in person, and I really see a lot of possibilities for using those virtual tools to do that.
That's really good stuff to hear right there. And Kathleen, last word on this topic?
Oh, sure. First, building on the many wonderful best practices Rhonda and Melanie shared, I too am taking notes. This is just a great forum today. You know, at NIH, equity and inclusion it's a critical priority and focus of any new workplace models we create. This is especially important with our new hires and hybrid arrangements where some people are at home and others are in the office. The principles guiding these efforts should begin, with the mission being first and forward-looking, while the strategies used to implement should be helping people stay connected and engaged no matter where or when they are working, and making sure that we ensure equitable access to technology and resources and support. So one thing I want to highlight is really the concept of we need to be intentional. Being intentional is a success factor here. Intentional about helping new hires establish connections with other staff and offices early on. Being intentional about creating opportunities for connectedness with both virtual and on-site staff at the same time. And really creating a new norm where staff pause to ask themselves, is everyone included who should be included? Do I need to be pulling someone into this meeting or discussion? We all need to be, worry about, out of sight, out of mind. And I think that that's a culture that we're going to have to really focus on because someone isn't physically in front of me. I need to be thinking of the whole workforce in the hybrid environment. One thing we learned over the last 2 years is really how technology helped level the playing field, opening this access to many. But we need to keep in mind that there is a need to take into account, standards and etiquette and technical core competencies and access for staff and continue to do that. We've been doing that. We need to continue to build on that as we move more into the hybrid environment. And I also want to make sure that we focus a little bit on flexible work, not just hybrid work. For example, doing hybrid well means moving away from the long-standing location-based models to the more human-centric models. And that we need to keep in mind the location where someone works may not be flexible. They may have, we might have frontline workers or the nature of their work just isn't portable, such as many of our scientific staff, who are working in our labs. So it's the overall concept of being, making sure it's important and we're being inclusive of these populations and communities as we envision the future of work and really shift to the hybrid models. So thank you for that.
That's great. Those all three of those, I took notes. So because I talked to a lot of customers and you guys are all doing great stuff. And I love the inclusiveness conversation there, Kathleen. That's really a big part of not just new employees, but existing employees and customers. So we've got about 5 minutes left, so we're going to do a lightning round. I'm going to ask a question, and I'll start with BJ. And give me, in 45 seconds or less, give me the first step that you would take and advise an agency that's just starting on their hybrid work journey. BJ, go.
I would say the first step would be to survey supervisors and employees to see what they're looking for to help you develop a plan that works for both groups, just to make sure that you aren't using any preconceived notions or any past biases as you develop your plans. Hope that helps.
Absolutely, that's great. Okay, Kathleen, back to you.
Well, I would say, adding on to those first steps is really to benchmark and check the literature out there. There's so much done in this space. There's so much to learn that you don't have to recreate the wheel. And so if you're starting out, reach out to your partners, recheck the literature. I think there's a lot to build on. Thank you.
Melanie?
Well, I would definitely do those same first two steps that BJ and Kathleen described, but I would also poll the manager, the leadership team throughout the agency on what does the work allow, what is possible given the nature of the job duty, so that we don't end up with a big mismatch between employees' expectations and hopes for flexibility and what is actually possible given the nature of the work. So we're trying to leave that defining the range of what's possible in terms of telework or remote work to each organization, because the work varies by organization and they are best acquainted with what's possible. And within that, we've asked them to offer the maximum flexibility. But really, there is an element here of what does it take to get the mission done and get the job accomplished. So I would add that to those first two steps, which I think are absolutely first steps.
And finally, Rhonda, I'll let you bring it on home.
Well, I will recap some of the things others have already said. So be sure to do your research, involve your human resources staff and key stakeholders early on. Make sure employee voices are heard. And one thing I would add, though, is to make sure that folks understand return to the workplace isn't the same as the future of work. You need to think about both.
That's awesome. That right there. That is a very good way to summarize. I think focusing on the future of work being different than just return to work. Thank you very much for that. So thanks all of you. This has been a very enlightening conversation for me today, and I've been engaged the entire time. It's wonderful to hear how you all are leading that in the federal space to try and bring parity to the workforce and make federal service a desired workplace. So with that, I am going to say thanks one more time, and I'll hand it over to Fed Insider's Claudia Hosky for some final thoughts for our audience.
Thanks so much, and thank you to all of our speakers for the insights today. And for our audience, thank you for your participation. Training certificates will be emailed after the webinar ends, and remember to log back in the next day or two to download a copy of today's transcript. We have many webinars in the works, so be sure to visit fedinsider.com to see what's coming up and to register for multiple events at the same time. And while you're there, you can check out our podcast, Feds at the Edge. And with that, this is Fed Insider signing off.